One summer moment can change a child's life. Through Toys for Tots Give and Go initiative, your support provides books, games, toys, and outdoor adventures that spark curiosity, creativity, and a love of nature. Whether it's fishing, learning a new sport, reading under a tree, or playing with friends, these moments build confidence and lifelong memories. For too many children, those moments never come. You can help change that this summer. Visit toysfortots.org. Toys for Tots, delivering hope beyond the holidays.
By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
Sky, the Dr. Sky Experience, is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
It is my honor to be the first host on WABC to officially welcome you to July 4th, 2026, and America's 250th anniversary in the Eastern Time Zone, as the Times Square ball has dropped and will drop a total of some 8 times to mark the start of America's 250th exceptional anniversary. In each of the U.S. time zones and territories, we continue here on the Dr. Sky Experience with, I think, a very important tradition and a tribute to America. Here's our salute to America on the Dr. Sky Experience.
250 years ago they signed their names, put everything at risk for freedom's sacred flame. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their honor too. Under God they built a nation strong and true. From 13 colonies a beacon rose to shine, a land where liberty and faith would intertwine. 250 years we stand, one nation under God's command. Though we face trials in these days, we trust in you and lift our praise. 250 years of grace, Lord help us fight for this sacred place. God bless America once more. Guide us like you've done before. The road in God we trust for all to see, endowed by him with sacred liberty. Through every generation battles came, but faith and freedom still remain. Yes, we see our values under fire, our heritage attacked by those who conspire. But we're not broken, we won't fall. We answer still to freedom's call. 250 years we stand.
From the Powerhouse Blowtorch Signal, Talk Radio 77 WABC, and broadcasting from the center of the universe to the nation and the world, welcome once again to the Dr. Sky Experience, a show that speaks with you, not at you, about the great mysteries of the universe from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. We like to call it a theater of the mind, where you can get involved in the conversation, and hoping you will as we move into this sacred holiday and America's 250th anniversary. The contact number, as always, is 1-800-848-9222, or simply 1-800-848-WABC. And while you're at it, why not download the WABC app? Because we call our show a theater of the mind, you have many other rooms to move through and navigate through to learn about not only this particular host, but all the other great hosts that appear here on WABC, 24 hours a day. Tonight's adventure, we'll be talking with a guest who's been here many times before as we move into somewhat of the weather segment of the Dr. Sky Experience. with Dane Wigington. Geoengineering is the topic. Many people have concerns about where these earthquakes are coming from, and so many of the other things that are changing the shape of the earth, weather-wise or otherwise. I'd be remiss if I didn't welcome our helmsmen, both Bill and Jackson, who navigate the calls that you call here once again. Proud to have you as part of our audience at 1-800-848-9222. A brief bio of our guest. Dane is the lead researcher administrator for the website geoengineeringwatch.org and is the executive producer for the groundbreaking climate engineering documentary, The Dimming. He has a background in solar energy, was a former employee of the Bechtel Power Corporation, and was a licensed contractor in California and Arizona. Dane has devoted the last 20 years of his life to the constant research on the issue of covert global climate engineering operations and the effort to expose and halt them. With that, Dane, happy 4th of July and happy 250th to you and your family. How are you on the West Coast?
To you too, Dr. Sky. We're dry and ready to ignite should any more lightning strikes come through. We had that about 2 weeks ago here, started a few fires. Cal Fire got on it quickly, but we can, as you know, much of the West is burning right now. A lot of Canada's burning. It's just the beginning. We're going to be in for a lot worse this summer. And you see the heat records being set all over. And what's key with that is historic humidity. That's the heat and humidity combination that makes this so much different and so much more deadly.
Well, Dane, to our home base, WABC, of course, in New York City, they're experiencing an unusual heat wave. We here in Arizona, when we say an average daily high of 107 this time of year, that's mild compared to the high temperatures. The all-time high was June the 26th, 1990 in Phoenix, when the thermometer reached the blistering 122. And further on in a few years after that, a blistering 129 degrees Fahrenheit in Lake Havasu. But those that are listening, and they're all over the nation and the world, obviously these concerns are major. Talk to us about weather changes and the simplicity of it from the geoengineering side. I mean, what's really happening in your opinion? Because I have like a knife to dice up this with your expertise in so many subcategories. What's going on with the weather in general so people understand?
Our position at geoengineeringwatch.org would start with this. If there's no legitimate discussion about weather, anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in this equation, and official agencies are not even mentioning this core component of the now completely derailed climate system. We're not blaming everything on this. Of course, we know we've not been good stewards of the planet, but we know we have NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. We have an illegal federal gag order with all National Weather Service and NOAA employees. This is really an enormous elephant in the sky that people want to pretend isn't taking place when you have grid patterns one day, nothing the next. And our airspace in Northern California, for example, on a day when they're conducting operations, we literally have planes going every direction imaginable, diagonal. We have no flight corridors over us. There's jets going, again, many different directions, dumping massive swaths behind them. We have jets that are easy to identify, for example. In the case of the larger tankers, like a C-17 Globemaster, you can't mistake that aircraft. It's a very unique aircraft. Only U.S. military has them, leaving massive plumes going one direction. In the case of the C-17s going north, they come back 4 or 5 hours later, leaving nothing behind them. We have the entire global climate science community and governments around the globe discussing their urgent desire to geoengineer, none of them admitting that these programs have been ongoing for decades.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation, and ladies and gentlemen, as I always do, I propose a question to the audience, and it would be simply this, as we get the conversation going here on the Dr. Sky Experience. What, ladies and gentlemen, in your opinion, is going on with the weather, and how concerned are you? And also the conversation that we have with Dane Wigington. He's going to be speaking about the subject of chemtrails, a very controversial subject to many, but not to our special guest. Talk a little bit more about yourself. I read your bio, but reading a bio doesn't do justice. You've been involved in this campaign pretty much on your own. I mean, you're not a multi-billionaire, and certainly that's not my right to ask you how much you have in your financial world, but you're doing this pretty much for education so that the commitment to what you talk about here gets spread around just like we're doing on this show. Talk a little bit about how you got involved in this subject as we talk about it with the audience.
This is the last thing I wanted to spend 20-plus years of my life doing nonstop. Never left my post. I was comfortably retired in Northern California. I have a habitat preserve here on the east side of Lake Shasta. I was restoring habitat on a large scale, working with state and federal agencies. I ran those programs directly. It's cost-sharing, part of my funds, part of theirs. But when it came to my attention that I was losing, in fact, I moved to Northern California to get out of this smoggy Southern California. My home was on the cover of the world's largest renewable energy magazine. I have wind, hydro, and solar. No sooner did I complete this project, Dr. Sky, when I was losing sometimes 50, 60, 70% of my solar power uptake from whatever these aircraft were leaving behind in the sky. No natural clouds, just these emissions. And I knew that couldn't be just, quote, condensation. I began to do diligent research on the subject of geoengineering. Didn't like what I found. I was surprised I had not heard more about it before. Began to test my rain samples to see if climate engineering elements were in those samples, starting with aluminum nanoparticles. Didn't want to find it in my rain, but it was there. The amount of aluminum nanoparticles in my rain continued to escalate in parallel with these programs. What was I to do once I was forced to face the fact, and there was mountains of data on geoengineering that confirmed everything that was happening in our skies, lab tests corroborating that. What was I to do but to face this issue? And that's what got me into this battle.
You can reach Dane here on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222, with your questions and comments. As we like to say here, we love conversation with dialogue and critical thinking, which is an interesting subject, more likely calling it common sense. I got to ask you this, from the green side of the equation, and not to talk politics here, for those that believe in a green agenda, how do you fulfill or even collide with those kind of concepts? I mean, is yours not necessarily leaning toward the green side? Because we see many people nowadays saying, we're destroying the planet, which I think in many cases you're right. So do you kind of stand different than those that are on the green side of the equation? Describe that, because I think people would want to know where your opinions are on this whole thing.
Yes, I do. I have great disdain for Al Gore. I have great disdain for every single environmental group because they refuse to acknowledge or address the single most destructive human activity of all, and that's saying a lot. Climate engineering operations, and we're not guessing. So not only, we all know Al Gore has made most people feel he's so hypocritical that they take the opposite position of anything he says. With the other green groups, WWF, Sierra Club, Greenpeace, our attorneys at geoengineeringwatch.org have spoken to attorneys from every major environmental group. None of those groups were willing to address climate engineering because they don't want to lose their 501c3 nonprofits.
Sure.
And that, to us, is criminal hypocrisy. And that's not to say that drill, baby, drill, and burn, baby, burn is a solution either. It's not. We have enough denial on all sides of the fence in this equation. And again, that's why we resort to that mantra, no legitimate discussion about climate anything without addressing this first. So we hope we build some bridges instead of burn them. But the bottom line is we have people on all sides of the fence, Dr. Sky, that have their head in the sand and refuse to address this immediate existential threat. Climate engineering is weather, chemical, and biological warfare because of the toxic elements being used. The threat from this can't be overstated.
Dane's website, geoengineering.org. We recommend you go there because what they're going to find, if they haven't gone there, Dane, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, it's a plethora of information. You could literally spend hours in there, not only with your position papers on some of the things you're seeing, but also current news stories, which you may or may not agree with, but you're fair enough to post this information for people to make up their own mind. Dane Wigington, he's our special guest. Geoengineering, of course, is the conversation that we have. And your questions and comments are most important here on the Dr. Sky Show. Look at the high temperatures that we're seeing across the nation, particularly this big heat wave that's affecting people. And many people are dying from this, and there's all warnings going out, cooling locations for people. We never had that here in Phoenix, and of course these high temperatures are literally off the charts. But it does matter because what, Dane? You mentioned it before. A higher concentration of humidity makes 95 degrees seem like hell on earth, correct, in certain instances?
It does. You're correct. If I could back up for a moment, just to clarify, our website is geoengineeringwatch.org.
Excuse me.
Geoengineering.org is a pro-geoengineering source site, and we are anything but pro. We work solely to expose and halt these operations. Back to the humidity. We have atmospheric conditions now that have not existed any time in the known history of the human species. Atmospheric RH, relative humidity buildup, is off the scale. And when you add humidity to those highest temperatures, everything changes because the human body cannot cool itself. Perspiration does not evaporate. There's no more cooling mechanism, and that, again, changes the entire equation. But we're being lied to on that front as well. Let me give an example from Thursday of this week. In Washington, D.C., at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, according to AccuWeather, temperature was 102 degrees with humidity of 53%.
Ouch.
Based on NOAA's own heat index calculator, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration heat calculator, 53% humidity with 102 degrees Fahrenheit is a heat index of 127.8.
That's amazing.
Nobody reported that truth. In fact, we had CNN reporting the heat index reading was 111. We had AccuWeather reporting 118. These people are all over the board. They're reading scripts. Literally, the weather disseminating entities are reading scripts. They're owned by all the major corporations, Weather Channel, Weather Central, Weather Nation, and they're reading weather, what amounts to the scheduled weather script passed down to them ultimately from Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, private defense contractors that do all the weather modeling for the National Weather Service and NOAA. So we don't have true weather experts. We have paid script readers.
Dane, this is interesting. From the astronomical side, we always bring that into the conversation because many people, of course, want to hear what's happening and what they can see in the heavens. But this is pretty simple. A head-scratcher for sure. The Earth is farthest from the sun on July the 6th at exactly 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. 94,502,961 miles away from our star, the sun. And many people are listening to this all over the world going, well, how the heck, if we're at the farthest point, can we have such high temperatures? And the simple answer is, not to go through the physics of it, is that the tipping of the Earth, naturally, we know from grammar school, we tip more to the sun during this time of year. But can you imagine, in the southern hemisphere, when we're closest to the sun, say Australia, back in January, they also have some incredible high temperatures. But let me go to the core of this whole thing here. We have recent solar activity. I've been reporting on this, privilege and honor to be also a correspondent here to other shows, and talking about this whole story of solar flares. Just recently, within the last few hours, another series of major solar flares, not to be alarmist, have blasted off from the sun. For those in northern Canada, they're getting, I'm sure right now, according to the globe view that I have, a very powerful display of the northern lights. Tie that in with solar activity in the weather from your perspective. I'd love to hear what you think a connection might be from geoengineering, the whole side there. How do we connect the dots?
Again, we cannot separate climate engineering operations that have been ongoing for over 80 years from everything else that's taking place or unfolding, even cosmologically. So in regard to the northern lights, we have a factor in this equation that's not being acknowledged. And some of the major aurora borealis events previously, going back a year, we had HAARP in Alaska. About 6 days before the last major event, they sent out a warning to keep air traffic out of their airspace during the exact window of time when the extremely profound aurora borealis took place. You could see in many of the southern latitudes. Is that just a coincidence?
No.
We know that facility, HAARP, again, the ionosphere heater in Wigington, Alaska, we know it's capable of transmitting 3.6 million watts of power to the electrically charged ionosphere. We know scientifically, it's not disputed, that it can create borealis effect. So how can we separate anything from this equation when we know we have these types of installations? They're weapons of mass destruction. They can literally manipulate atmospheric pressure zones, and they're all over the globe. HAARP is the largest, but the atmosphere at this point is a physics lab, Dr. Sky. They're doing whatever they want because they can. Now let's add the electrically conductive particulates that is ionizing the atmosphere, making it more electrically conductive, creating more dry lightning, and there's so many layers to this, so it's really can't be separated out no matter what the cosmological event we're told is occurring. When you have the atmosphere being damaged, and I'll leave it with this, the ozone layer, that is most critical, and we now have some admissions coming from the climate science community that it wasn't just the CFCs. In fact, we would argue that's a very small part of the equation. Climate engineering is the biggest ozone-destroying factor of all. But in this last week, just a week ago, we had admissions. It wasn't just CFCs.
Amazing.
In fact, they now know that official sources knew the ozone layer was beginning to significantly degrade in the 50s. They knew that in the 50s.
That's
Why
amazing.
did it take so long to admit to it?
Well, just for the audience so they know, O2, you simply know what your breathable oxygen is. But triatomic oxygen, as you know, Dane, O3, a very precious commodity in the atmosphere to preserve what? Again, not only against the shielding against ultraviolet, but a very interesting component as things have changed here across the globe. And again, trying to tie in this whole thing, as I always say, and people sometimes disagree with me, of course they can, or they agree with me, that's nice, that all weather comes from the sun. But you're talking about here some amazing things here that we really need to pay attention to, not only in your opinion, and learning much more at geoengineeringwatch.org. I'm sorry I didn't get that right before, but it's so important here. We have literally like a full board of callers coming up here during these 2 hours. And ladies and gentlemen, if you do not get through in hour number one, I always ask you kindly, if you'd like to either call back or if your patience is there, we hope it is, to stay on the line as we continue here. Let's continue with the callers. Dane, there's so many here that would like to ask questions. Let's go to line number one and welcome Greg in Michigan. You're on with Dane. How are you doing?
Hey,
happy 4th.
Very well. Hey, happy birthday, America. Congrats to Travis and Tay-Tay. And it's Mr. Positive, boom shakalaka. Sorry to get off topic real quick, but I'd really like to know your thoughts maybe. We understand the universe pretty well. We don't understand our conscious mind. Do you think we'll ever be able to understand how our conscious mind works?
I would hope so, Greg, but again, this is a very deep subject, and it's not really totally off subject, but I'm going to make a recommendation, and I always do this. He's a good friend. As you listen to and maybe read the book, Rizwan Virk, a very interesting man, wrote a book called The Simulation Hypothesis. And why do I promote that book? Because to me it was most fascinating as a guest. He talks about the concept that what we see in our experience of what we think consciousness is, that everything around you, this call that you're making to us, me responding to you, Dane on the line, and millions of people listening, is all an orchestrated event behind the curtain, so-called. What is that curtain? So we'll have to leave it at that because of time, but check that out if you would, Greg, because the conscious mind, that's something totally amazing, that we look at the time, the arrow of time, which moves forward, not backward. What we're seeing in this reality world with consciousness is really one of the most baffling things, and it could be an illusion. I know that sounds crazy, but happy 4th and happy 250th. Thank you, Greg, for being on the Dr. Sky Experience. Dane, I know sometimes we jump into other topics here, but I'm trying to ask the audience, and I shall, if we can, of course, try to stay as measured on topic as we can with the limited time that we have. But some of the other interesting things here, and I know we could get into a super discussion, and we will on the other side of the break, which is just a few moments away. The whole concept, as you talk about, chemtrails. They're not contrails in your mind, so give us a couple of minutes of your definition so people can really understand the difference. They may or may not agree, but obviously you have the floor on that. I think it's important to make a distinction here again.
I'll start with the fact that we at Geoengineering we avoid the chemtrails term like the plague, because that is not a science term, and anybody who searches that term, if you're introducing this subject to others and they go and Google that term, they're going to go straight to conspiracy theory and hoax by design.
Sure.
That's the end of their search. They're done. So we try to stick to the science terms, of which there are many: stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, solar radiation management, the list goes on. Backing up to the ozone scenario, because that by itself, the depleting and disintegrating ozone layer, and based on our measurements, we're near functional collapse of the ozone layer, which is incredibly dire. And that by itself is an extremely near-term existential threat. We know we're getting shortwave radiation on the surface now, not just UVA, not just UVB. We're getting down into the mid to lower 200 nanometer spectrum. That's way into UVC. We think we're seeing even shorter wave radiation here now. What people don't understand the difference between shortwave and long wave radiation. The shortwave radiation can penetrate into the atmosphere. It's very thermally penetrating as well. And then when the sun goes down at night, the planet would normally emit long wave radiation back up, but that's being blocked now due to all the emissions into our atmosphere. Climate engineering, a core part of that. These reflective particles also blocking the return of long wave radiation. So we're sealing up our fishbowl. It's getting warmer. In regard to the mixing of the atmosphere, which is essential for certain elements to reach upper layers of the atmosphere for ozone regeneration, it's not happening because the atmosphere is stratifying, and climate engineering is a core part of that. So from every conceivable direction, this inconceivably complex atmosphere, it's as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball, by the way, to put that in perspective. Our atmosphere is mathematically as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball. That's what allows us to live here, and we're treating it with total contempt, climate engineering being at the core of that. So if we continue on this course, it looks beyond grim. Encourage people to pay attention to their senses. When that sun feels like it's searing your skin, it is. We're getting DNA-damaging radiation on the surface now.
That's
we
amazing,
know it because we're measuring it. Yep.
I know we're almost up against the break, but you're so right. I've heard it expressed this way in many programs that I do in the teaching role. If you took an apple, and this is interesting, the usable atmosphere that we depend on for breathing in our livelihood to continue to living is as thin as the skin on the apple. And that is quite amazing. And look what's happening to it. Whether we believe indeed that climate change is happening in vast amounts, that the how do I say this, the green side of the equation believes that doom and gloom is here, or whether people like yourself that are bringing to us serious scientific evidence, which you do not normally hear in the mainstream or regular legacy media, and that's why we're grateful to have you here. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to get in on the conversation, we see that we have Silas in Staten Island, Max in Manhattan, Frank in Maine, and many others that I'm sure would like to welcome and be part of this experience on the Dr. Sky Experience. We call it a theater of the mind, and rightfully so. Until we can do this in the broadcast mode of showing you the images, it's all in the theater of the mind, and we do appreciate you. Much more with Dane Wigington with Geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hoorah! I am Gunnery Sergeant Arlie Ermey, better known as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman of Full Metal Jacket. When I'm not shining my shoes in brass and keeping my rifle clean, I'm listening to Steve Cates. Hoorah! Semper Fi, do or die. Hold 'em high at 8th and I.
The Second Continental Congress adopted the text of the Declaration of Independence, as you know, on July 4th, 1776. Our celebration continues not only for that date, but the solemn anniversary of America's 250th anniversary. The document was formally signed, many not know, on August 2 of 1776 by some 56 delegates. As we continue here at the 31-minute mark, we continue with our very special guest talking about geoengineering, how, in his opinion, and many others, it does affect our lives. Who is he? Dane Wigington. Geoengineeringwatch.org as we continue, ladies and gentlemen, with your calls. He's been patient on line number 2. Silas, good morning in Staten Island. Happy 4th of July.
Yeah, happy 4th. I wanted to speak about one, not only with the environment, but
yes,
the sun has a great deal to do with what happens to Earth, and there's really nothing mankind can do about it.
Okay.
And as far as our 250th birthday, I'm looking at race and wealth. 1776, black men were slaves. 1876, 1976, blacks were still mistreated. By 2026, there are more black millionaires and billionaires here, and there's no other country on the face of this earth that could have ever produced it but
yes,
this exceptional, extraordinary America.
You know, with all the faults that we could go back into history, we talked of positivity, but you're so right on that, Silas, that it is a land of opportunity, as many people will challenge that. But the interesting conversation we have, thank you for being part of the show as we celebrate this amazing holiday, not only the 4th of July, but as we continue to talk about 250th anniversary. Imagine what it'll be like, Silas, 250 years in the future, as we hope we obviously operate our lives in world and government with the subject of common sense. Thank you, Silas. Dane, this is interesting. The callers are jumping in, a mixed bag as we talk about not only the great traditions of America, but also the things that are seen or unseen behind the curtain. Let's continue with your conversation on what's happening with these trails of chemicals that you see and other, adjuvants and particles. I mean, this is very interesting, but I'm sure, let me jump in with this one, that you're challenged on this a lot, aren't you not? I mean, again, my information and the information you're giving here, it's in the opinion of our guest and myself. But tell us, I mean, more and more that you do this, you're opening people's minds on this. But tell us what's in this mixture that's coming from the sky.
If I could back up just a moment, though, I want to clarify, though I have great disdain for the environmental groups, Mr. Gore, that doesn't mean I disagree with their assessment on how badly damaged the planet is. As I've stated at Geoengineering Watch for almost 20 years, that it's not as bad as we're being told. It's far worse. It's far worse than anything Gore stated. In fact, we know from a week ago, data that's just released on Al Gore's models, it's been used for how much auto emissions is actually going into our atmosphere. It fails to show 79 to 90% of the true emissions. So which side is Gore really on? We know he owns stock in the very companies he claims to be fighting. So all I'm saying is that we need to get past Al Gore. We need to get past our biases and everything that causes us to look through a colored lens. we have trashed this planet. There's no doubt about that. And if we don't deal with it soon, based on current statistics, we're not projecting, based on current statistics, we're going to be hitting the wall soon. So I'm only encouraging people to reassess their opinions. Let's, again, stand on the fact that this intentional intervention with the atmosphere, which is not being done for benevolent purposes ultimately, it's a form of covert weather warfare, crown jewel weapon for the military-industrial complex. And whatever the sun's doing, whatever anything in the solar system is doing, we can't ignore this factor. To do so would be to run someone over in a crosswalk, beat them, stab them, shoot them, burn them, and claim they died of a heart attack. It's just natural. It's Occam's razor. You can't ignore all these other factors, and too many people are doing exactly that. In regard to what they're putting into our atmosphere, there's no rational debate that this is a sprayed payload dispersion. We have up-close film footage, nozzles visible, dispersions being turned on and off, and we have taken, at the cost of about $100K, a NOAA flying lab, top scientists to altitude, sampled what heavy aircraft were emitting, processed that at Rensselaer Polytechnic in New York, world-renowned lab, and found climate engineering elements. So there's no legitimate debate. This spraying is going on, period.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, years ago, and it's still an ongoing bit of litigation with the chemicals that people use for the weed killers, and that was obviously heinous, and that continues in litigation, I'm sure, with payouts and other arguments legally. But what's interesting that you're talking about, what specifically, in your opinion, from your research, is actually dropping out? If you could name some kind of things, I think you started before, something had to do with aluminum particulates, am I correct?
Aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, surfactants, graphene, the list goes on. And in the case of aluminum, for example, we have certain individuals who seem tasked with trying to marginalize this issue, claiming, well, aluminum is a very common element in our strata, which it is. So we should expect to see it everywhere. No, not free-form aluminum. Free-form aluminum does not exist naturally. It's bonded to other elements always. If we're finding free-form aluminum coming down through our air column, which is a primary element named in climate engineering patents, by the way, it's been mined and refined and dispersed. And to add credence to this, in our groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, anyone who chooses to view that, it's available for free on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. They can see me confronting the world's most recognized climate engineer at an international geoengineering conference with a question that they, by the way, banned me from the subsequent conferences. I asked him for all his symposium on pushing the dispersion of tens of millions of tons of aluminum nanoparticles into the atmosphere. Had any toxicological studies been done, human or environmental?
It's horrible.
He stuttered, and then his first response was, we've studied atmospheric particulate loading. There's a lot of particulates up there. A bit more won't hurt. No, those aren't aluminum particulates. Have you studied aluminum? And he ended with this. Caught him flat-footed. He said, no. Could terrible things happen tomorrow? We don't know. Of course they know. Aluminum, bioavailable aluminum, is toxic to all life forms, period, no exception. They know what they're doing.
Well, it's one of the worst extinction events other than asteroids and comets hitting the Earth, and in your opinion, you're educating us on these subjects. Let's go to line number 3. Max, of course, in Manhattan. He's been patient. You're on with Dane Wigington. How are you? Happy 4th.
Thank you, Dr. Wigington, and thank you, Dr. Sky. I have, if with geoengineering, are we able to test our bodies to see how much aluminum is in it, in our bodies? And number 2, will zeolites or tuning forks somehow chelate these particles from our body?
Interesting questions. Wow. Very, very, very much on measure. What about that, Dane? I mean, how do you identify what particulates might be in your body to the point of excess? That's interesting.
Those are very good questions, Max. So in the case of finding out what's in your system, hair, blood, urine, you have to know how to take that test, and many major healthcare providers specifically ban their subscribers from taking these tests. Why would that be? California stopped testing for aluminum in drinking water in 2002. Why would that be? So even if you take a hair, blood, or urine test, if you don't do pre-testing chelation, you will have a skewed result because aluminum adheres to cell receptors like a plaque. It's not always migrating around. So the chelation has to be done very carefully. There's specific pre-testing chelation protocol, and everybody we know that has done that properly shows extreme amounts of all of these elements. And it's a wonder we're walking and talking at this point. If we could look at a smaller organism and what's happening to that, let's look at the bees. Everybody knows the bees are disappearing. In fact, we have statistics this year alone, this last year, 70% of the bee population collapsed. That sounds bad. That is bad. What's the real story? That was a 70% collapse of the 20% that was remaining. We're down to single-digit bee populations left, and we have peer-reviewed study in the case of the bees. If you search bees aluminum, bees are dying of massive aluminum exposure, bioavailable aluminum. They can't even find their way back to the hive. How long till we succumb? And back to the question of chelation and zeolite. Zeolite is one element. The zeolite can tend to free sequestered aluminum up, but not necessarily escort it out of your body. Chelation has to be done very carefully. I would suggest speaking to a very qualified nutritionalist, but it's something we should all be working on.
You know, Max, if there was a gold star to give in our Theater of the Mind so far of all the callers, we appreciate everyone, but you're most specific here. So you get an opportunity to ask another question, or I appreciate your time. I mean, that's pretty fascinating. Body, check your body. And how do you find out, like you normally can get a test for COVID? Anything else you'd like to add, Max? Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Sky. Now, do you have, Wigington, do you have any suggestions of doctors we can go to, or a source where we can begin to search for the proper doctor?
We don't recommend. We don't give any recommendations, but certainly if you find a very qualified nutritionalist that understands chelation, and many chelating elements are basic elements you should take anyway. Vitamin C, a lipo-C, appropriate calcium. If your body doesn't have enough calcium, it can tend to substitute aluminum in its stead. You don't want that. So again, a nutritionalist and chelation, there's a lot of information available online. Bottom line, we know these elements are coming down through the air column. They're showing up in everything, everyone, everywhere, ubiquitously, and that's on top of, for example, PFAS forever chemicals, which we have peer-reviewed study. Anybody listening to this show right now can search this. PFAS forever chemicals are showing up in every single drop of rain everywhere on planet Earth, from the North Pole to the South Pole to the top of Mount Everest. We're breathing all of this stuff. We're living in
Say that again. Excuse me, Dane. PFAS, is that what you just said, so people can hear it clearly? I didn't quite hear it.
PFAS, forever chemicals. That's a category of chemical. There's about 15,000 of them. But many of that category of chemical are showing up literally, peer-reviewed science study, easy to find online, every single drop of rain everywhere on planet Earth right now.
You know, it's sad as we move into this most joyous time of the 4th of July and 250th anniversary of America, but obviously no apology necessary. We talk about in this one, we have so many realms, from astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, American exceptionalism, celebrities. Why not talk about this so-called weather-related phenomenon, because there's so much in the mix here. But Max in Manhattan, thank you for educating us on something and some answers from Dane. Appreciate it. Have a good, happy 4th of July. Thank you so much. You know, this is interesting. Before we go to the next break here, I wanted you to expound on this a little more. They're detecting what? In other words, you just leave out, let's say, an area like a rain catcher, and you take that to, where would you take that to identify what's in the raindrops? That's another good question that I have no idea how to do, other than your body and the chelation that you're talking about. How do you do that and check the rainwater to check what you just told about PFAS in there?
Okay, one, we do have, we have multiple peer-reviewed science studies already confirming it's in every single drop of rain. As far as individual testing goes, that can be a little bit precarious in that we know we have certain labs that perform testing for states and municipalities that don't want in the middle of any controversy. We have lab tests, for example, for climate engineering elements that we know have been scrubbed because we sent out duplicate tests. We had one testing institution near a Boeing plant, and that sample came back indeed and undetected. For aluminum, duplicate sample went out, was packed with aluminum. We know that owner just didn't want in the middle of this. We went to an engineering firm or testing firm, and what they normally do, their normal business is to test frozen precipitation, snow, for contaminants. They refused to test for geoengineeringwatch.org. We didn't want their opinion. We just wanted them to do a test because they knew what it was for. So the bottom line is we have a lot of people running scared at this point. They don't want in the middle of this controversy. It's truly sad because we have so many people hiding in their cabins on the deck of the planetary Titanic, and it is that bad. And I'm operating off current statistics, global insect populations right now today, down 80 to 90%. Wildlife population is down conservatively about 75% in the last 40 years. Fisheries, global pelagic fish populations down 90%. Plankton in the Atlantic down 90%. These are staggering statistics, peer-reviewed study. And people are going about their lives as if nothing's wrong, and that's not going to continue for much longer.
Well, thanks for opening our minds on this in the Theater of the Mind. Again, if you're waiting in line here in the queue in the Theater of the Mind, you will be seated and have an opportunity to ask your questions. When we return from this break in just a moment, We have, and we'll welcome Frank in Maine on line 4. On line 1, Dave's in Pennsylvania, and Robert, line number 2 in Philadelphia, regular caller to the Dr. Sky Experience. And you too, ladies and gentlemen, can be part of the show, 1-800-848-9222, as we take a short break and say, well, why not head to the snack bar? Because I'll do the same, and we'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is Little Anthony and the Imperials, and you're listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
The 555-foot-tall Washington Monument is adorned with a 100-ounce aluminum cap, 8.9 inches tall. On its east-facing side, it's inscribed with the Latin phrase Laus Deo, praise be to God. So when the first light of sun hits the east side of that little tiny pyramid, it, of course, rejoices around the world about our special day today, July 4th, and the 250th anniversary of America. That small little aluminum cap was placed on top of the Washington Monument December the 6th, 1884. And it's a sort of a lightning rod, too. 47 minutes after the hour, we continue with our special guests. They're all great as we continue to bring you the latest and best information possible from the great realms that we speak about. Let's go to line number 4 and welcome Frank in Maine. Happy 4th, happy 250th, and thanks for joining us and being patient.
Good morning, Dr. Sky, and happy 4th of July. Happy birthday, America, 250th anniversary. You can't make it up. I remember the 200th one back in 1976, and
sure,
that one was amazing. This one is a little different, but it's still amazing nonetheless. My comment, my question is about what these elements, aluminum and all the other elements that come with it, and plus the man-made structures that are being built, such as windmills, instead of nuclear power. We're building, well, quote-unquote, windmills. In my state, they want to build windmills, and they may just do it.
And data centers. They want to make data centers.
And data centers, too, right. Absolutely, data centers. That's a debatable, that may come in fruition any day now. But I digress. What do you, is there any research to suggest that these man-made structures, such as a windmill, that's supposed to make our lives not only, more affordable with energy, but also supposed to help the environment, what are they doing to the oceans? And what are they doing to what are they doing to our minds? I've been noticing that people have been getting madder and more frustrated as the days go on. And I'm wondering if any of these, quote unquote, like solar panels, that they're cutting down trees in order to put solar panel parks up.
Interesting points.
Are they doing anything? Are they affecting our minds? Are they affecting our bodies? Are they affecting human bodies? Are we subjecting ourselves to one thing while destroying ourselves?
Well, thanks, Frank. Stay with us. And Dane, he brings up a plethora of information here and question-wise, but I'd love you to take the floor on those.
Thank you for your questions, Frank. And first, let's move into the wind turbines. Is that truly green energy? Absolutely not. Is nuclear power green energy or sustainable in any environmentally non-destructive sense? No. Both are simply different forms on different levels of different problems. As far as what's affecting our bodies, our brains, our thoughts, there is nothing at a greater scale than the nanoparticulates that we are inhaling with every single breath we take. So whatever else might be affecting certain aspects of the planet's life support system. There is no greater threat than us not being able to inhale without sucking in a lungful of nanoparticles. You can fit up to 100,000 nanoparticulates across the width of a single human hair, and they're not even being disclosed by any official air quality testing agency. They test for PM10 and PM2.5 at best. So nanoparticles are so small, they enter straight through the olfactory nerve, through the nasal passage into the olfactory nerve, into the bloodstream. They cross the blood-brain barrier, and we are being literally saturated with these highly toxic nanoparticles. And if we look at just the climate engineering elements, primary elements that we know about, for example, aluminum, and we all have mercury in us now from coal-fired power plants, amalgam filling.
We sure do.
That may be a part of the base material mix being used for climate engineering as well, because we think coal fly ash is being used as a base material. So in the case of aluminum, I'm trying to get Frank's question of what's affecting our cognitive function. If we look at aluminum, we know that's highly toxic neurologically. Same with mercury. When you combine those two metals, and now they're combined in every single one of us, you get synergistic toxicity. And based on peer-reviewed science study, combination of those two metals can push the overall toxicity up as much as 100 times. That's unimaginable. So, again, it's a wonder any of us are walking and talking at this point. So I would argue that's our greatest and most immediate threat, aside from everything else. If we can't breathe without sucking in a lungful of toxic metals, we have a problem.
We sure do. Thank you, and thank you, Frank in Maine. Appreciate you, and happy 4th of July. I got a question for you. Is colloidal silver something, and again, I'm not a person who talks in the naturopathic world, and that's why I'm asking, is that some sort of a buffer for people? I mean, I don't know, maybe after the show, if you say yes, the sales of colloidal silver will go off the charts, but could that be, or is that possible that does help mitigate some of these problems from breathing in things like this? Colloidal
silver has distinct benefits, no question, if it's used properly. However, for chelation purposes, and that's essential at this point for everyone to chelate, it's a matter of time. Different individuals have systems that have more resilience than others, but the bottom line is we know this. These nanoparticles are showing up everywhere. They're not being reported by any official testing agency, and that's not an accident. So the bottom line is there are other forms of chelation. I would recommend everyone to speak to their own nutritionalist based on their own personal physiology. Yeah.
Let's go to line number 1. Dave's been patient in Pennsylvania as we wrap up hour number 1. And also on line 2, Robert, we're going to have to ask you kindly if you'll stay on with us to be on in the hour number 2. But let's welcome Dave in Pennsylvania. How are you? Happy 4th. Well, Dave just disappeared into the ether there, so let's continue with line number 2, Robert in Philadelphia. Happy 4th of July to you.
Hey, Dr. Sky and your wonderful guest, Dane. I appreciate all your information. Happy 250th to everybody out there. I'll be celebrating big and can't wait for the weekend. Now, I came on here with 2 questions in mind, but there's fascinating information from, Mr. Wigington?
Yes, sir.
Wigington, yes.
Wigington, okay. You mentioned something about these particulates being found in raindrops. Now, if I'm understanding correctly, since it's largely distilled water, rain doesn't conduct electricity, which is probably a good thing with the lightning strikes. But if there are these particulates in the rainwater before it even comes close to the ground, doesn't that leave open the possibility of it conducting, say, a 6 million volt thunderbolt and dispersing it all over the place?
Interesting.
It does, and atmospherically, in general, on top of that, again, the atmosphere is being ionized, and there are other purposes they're using this for. So to explain to your guests, we didn't really dive in this. What is the stated purpose of what they're doing? The stated purpose officially is to fill the sky with sun-blocking particles to slow down some of the sun's incoming thermal energy, to slow down the warming of the planet. We know after 80 years of this insanity, one, they're using it as a covert weapon of war so they can wreak havoc on populations and blame nature, but 2, we know these programs are not only not mitigating the thermal energy buildup on planet Earth, they're actually radically accelerating it. So again, on the atmospheric conductivity question, we know they're using this for other components of warfare, over-the-horizon radar and communications, and there's so many layers to ionizing the atmosphere further, and there's no regard for the consequences, virtually none. So again, there's not an uncontaminated drop of rain on the planet. Yes, if they contain electrically conductive particulates, that's going to affect the conductivity of that rain. And we know even the pH of the rain is radically different than, for example, from pre-civilization, when we'd have something more close to neutral, we know from atmospheric carbon loading right now that an untainted, they're all tainted, but a drop of rain may be 5.6 because of atmospheric carbon loading. That's quite acidic already. But we do know that when there's a lot of aluminum being dispersed we have done hundreds of lab tests, we see rain tests with the pH escalates about 10 times back toward alkaline because of the buffering effect of the aluminum. The aluminum tends to push the rain pH back toward neutral from either side
Well,
of the
Dane,
spectrum.
excuse me for interrupting. Help us to know what should be a normal, or what we consider to be what it should be. What pH should rainwater be, just so people know?
Okay, if we're talking about, aside from any other form of pollution like climate engineering right now, a drop of rain would be still about 5.6, and that's because of all the carbon loading we pumped into the atmosphere. So when we see a rain sample that's 6.6, and from a sample that we know contains copious amounts of aluminum in it, those two correlate together, the raised pH from the aluminum. So again, there's so many variables depending on what they're dispersing over what area. Dr. Sky and Robert, you've seen now, I'm sure, that so many storms contain, or they produce baseball and softball size hail. You've seen that, right?
I've seen it physically, not that big, on my own vehicles here in Arizona, where they're $1 billion, expense that it costs to the insurance companies for damage.
They're canceling
from hail the size of quarters. That was
Well, now there's baseball and softball. They're canceling hail coverage across the board. Because this is where I'm stating there's so many variables what shows in the rain. So that's chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. There's other constituents there, including urea named in patents as part of these mixes, endothermic elements, ammonium, and so they are skewing everything. But that chemical cool down produces a cold dense layer, sinks to the surface. They can lower temperatures temporarily by doing what damage to the ground. I mean, it's an absolute free-for-all in our skies, and Americans are choosing to be oblivious to it. But that
well, thank you, Dane. Not to cut you short, but again, in the time-space continuum, you know this, as the listeners do. The hour is almost up, but we're going to continue with you in hour number 2. Robert, as always, thank you for your interest in this radio show and your great questions and the comments from the great guests that we have. Wishing you and your family a most joyous 4th of July. Let's talk, ladies and gentlemen. We have many people still on the line here. If we don't get to you, obviously, in this hour, please hold on. Line 3 would have Wendy in Long Island. Line 1, Tom in New Jersey, and Line 5, Joe in Long Island. A very interesting morning here as we celebrate the nation's birthday, July 4th. Wow, 1776. As I mentioned before, we'll be reading some of these so-called trivia bits about America and about American exceptionalism. And tomorrow night, we continue on the story of American exceptionalism. How about this, ladies and gentlemen? With all the changes that are going on in the world, author, CNBC correspondent Dennis Neal, his new book, Oregoners, How One State Chased Away Business and People, putting it into what's going to happen in this country. At least many people don't want it to happen. The big changes, we want to stay on measure about truth, justice, and the American way. Dane, it's interesting, and I want to give out your website once again. I did it wrong, and certainly you're apologetic, and I'm apologetic, and you accept my apologies. Geoengineeringwatch.org. He is Dane Wigington. And like I mentioned before, right, Dane, so much information, you can kind of spend hours on his website with his own opinion and research, and also many news articles that do pop up. We continue on the other side of these important announcements and the news update from the Worldwide News Network here on your radio station, the Powerhouse Blowtorch, as we like to call it. That signal beaming itself out into not only the nation, the world, and I'm sure way out into the cosmos. And thank our helmsmen who are behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen, as behind the curtain in the theater of the round and the theater of the mind, as we talk about and give honor to Billy and Jackson, helping us to make the Dr. Sky experience what you would expect. Happy 4th and happy 250th. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
The powerhouse blowtorch signal of Talk Radio 77 WABC welcomes you to hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience. As we're proud to talk about broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, to the nation, the world, and I'm sure even out to the cosmos. Our show, we like to think of it as sort of a theater of the mind, where you get in with critical thinking and also with dialogue, and again, have an opportunity to express your opinions and comments to some of the great guests that we have. The contact number, 1-800-848-9222. And while you're at it, why not download the WABC app? Because in our theater of the mind, there are many other rooms to explore and listen to the many great hosts here that you listen to, and those that will be beginning to listen to some of the great hosts here on this great powerhouse radio station. Our helmsmen are both Bill and Jackson. We thank them for getting you on the air. Who's our guest and what's our topic? Well, in tonight's adventure, we go and explore the subject of geoengineering with a very popular guest, Dane Wigington. Geoengineeringwatch.org is his website, and we continue now with hour number 2. Dane, thanks for staying with us. We now go to line number 3. She's been patient. Good morning, Wendy, in Long Island. Happy 4th of July to you. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you. Same to you. So, unless I missed it, what is geoengineering, who's doing it, and why?
Good question. Dane, you got the floor.
Thank you, Wendy. I alluded to some of that before the break. What we're told officially, the purposes of these programs is to slow the warming of the planet. Stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, cloud albedo enhancement, solar radiation management to put light scattering particles into the sky to block some of the sun's incoming thermal energy to mimic the temporary toxic cooling of a volcanic eruption. That's the stated purpose. We know that there's no benevolence in these programs. They are being used to mask, in many ways, the true severity of damage already done to the planet, while paradoxically inflicting even more damage, and we know they're being used as weapons of war. So let's look at historical fact. These programs were first deployed immediately after World War II over the polar regions. We know there were beta testing in World War II because people refer to the World War II bombers like B-17s that left these massive plumes behind them. That's proof this is all condensation. That's nonsense. We found on military archives, it's in our groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming. Again, that's the best A to Z on this issue. For free, homepage, geoengineeringwatch.org. We found military archives, B-17s flying in formation, one filming another that had a massive plume being emitted from that aircraft, shut off instantly as it was being cut with a knife. Did that plane fall out of formation? No, it was clearly dispersing an element. We know that they were beta testing World War II. We know in the 60s, Project Popeye, historical record, U.S. military was so successful at controlling the weather over Vietnam that they passed the INMOD treaties in the 70s, environmental modification treaties. So again, this is historical record, and we have other instances where we have officials, governmental officials, speaking directly about the weather weapon potential. That's in our film, The Dimming. We have 2 U.S. Air Force generals acknowledging the weapon potential of modifying the atmosphere and using nature as a weapon, natural systems as a weapon. So that's absolutely a crown jewel sought mechanism of control for the power structure. As far as those doing it, that's key. Who's in control of everything, aside from the political theater?
Right, who's behind the curtain in all this? That's what everybody, I'm sure, wants to hear, in your opinion. But Wendy, do you have a follow-up to this? Because obviously your question is very interesting. Definition, if you didn't hear it. And I hope
can answer that final question, though, Dr. Sky.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Again, as far as who's behind this, again, people are caught up on the whole paradigm of left, right, conservative, Democrat, Republican. We would argue that's all theater. Those who print the money, those who control the printing of money, those who control the Federal Reserve, the bank, that's who's in charge of militaries, that's who's in charge of countries. Everything else is theater. All roads lead to those who print the money. And again, this is not hard to verify when we look at the fact the Pentagon officially is missing $30-something trillion in the last 15 years. Where did that money come from? Let alone where did it go? Those are Black Ops money, Black Ops operations. So, and the final question I think is important. Many people ask, well, why would they do this to themselves? Right? Have you heard that, Dr. Sky? Why would they do this to themselves?
Well, obviously, that's a big question out there. And I want to give, before you continue, Dan, I want to give Wendy, if she's still with us. Sure. Wendy, do you have another comment on this? Because we didn't give you a fair shake on this. Go ahead.
Well, no. I'm interested in what you have to say. I thought I was going to drift off into sleep, but now I'm wide awake. So okay. what is the average listener to your show can do about this. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's anything in our control.
Yes, good point. We don't want to have our hands behind our back and tied, right? So, Dane, that's a very good question that Wendy brought up. What can we do?
The average listener could do much more than they think. All of this comes down to a critical mass of awareness. When I started this battle 20-plus years ago, I only heard my own voice echoing back at me. That's it. Along the way, I had people contacting me like Canadian Minister of Defense, Air Force generals, people who knew this was going on, wanted to play their part in trying to expose and stop it. And that comes down to every single individual and people sharing credible data from a credible source. It's the stone thrown in the pond, and how far out do those ripples go? And when you share with two people credible data first day of a 30-day month, and they share with two people the next day, and so on for 30 days, now millions of people know. And now we have the people participating, like U.S. military brothers and sisters, who are being told they're doing something benevolent, something good, something necessary, something needed, which couldn't be further from the truth. Once they know and their families know they're participating in their own demise, we would hope we can stop these programs from the inside out. So this takes all of us pushing in our own location, like the colonists. Let's take the colonists. Did they line up like the British in little rows and then shoot? No, they fought from behind rocks and trees, wherever they were. That's the strategy we need.
No, it's interesting. Wendy, thank you for being part of the show. I certainly brought up some interesting points to Dane earlier, and I'm glad that you got an explanation, and hopefully a complete one, on geoengineering. Have a great 4th of July weekend as we tell all that, and all those who are listening to the show all over the world. That's interesting. You know, Dane, without a long explanation right now because of time, and I'm bringing up the subject, so forgive me. When you talk about some other aerosols that were sprayed during Vietnam, the horrific thing of Agent Orange, I mean, if you want to talk about something coming out of the sky, look at the damage that's done to so many of our people here in the military over the course of time. That's another horrific story of aerosols coming out of the sky used for direct military purposes.
You're completely correct.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing what you're saying.
The exact parallel with the pilots spraying Agent Orange in Vietnam told, hey, this is going to kill your pal on the ground. No, they weren't told. Aside from all the civilians, they weren't told that was going to kill their own comrades on the ground. Same with depleted uranium used in our ammunition in the Gulf states.
Oh, DU is horrible. Yeah. That's a horrible thing. Let's continue here. We have many callers, and we appreciate all of them in the Theater of the Mind. Line number 1, we go to Tom in New Jersey. Good morning. Happy 4th of July. Your comment, your question, you're on.
Okay, good morning. My idea may seem a little simple, but this is the way I see it. If we are being contaminated, have been contaminated, and will continue to be contaminated by the chemtrails, that goes into the water, the food, our bodies, everything. And after so much time, there's basically nothing we can do about it because we're like a sponge. Everything is a sponge. We're contaminated. So I figure the way I see it, and when I said this is a simple thing, I figure what we could do is the best we can, say a prayer, and hope for the best. Because we only have X amount of time here. Whether we figure out what is going in our food, water, and our bodies, we only have so much time here. And we could figure it out, but then what?
Well, Tom, you're right. Prayer is very powerful. I would never debate that. I would agree with that. But, Dane, this is interesting when callers like Tom bring up the subject, or like Wendy. What can we do about this, and how much time do we have? We have to expose what's happening. Just like with the UFO situation. We want disclosure. But in this case, we need immediate disclosure on this one, too.
I would first back up to what I stated with our former caller, that any one of us could be the final pebble that triggers the landslide of awakening, which would cause a shockwave around the world as populations all over the globe understand what their governments have done to them without their knowledge or consent. That would be the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment. And even if we look at Scripture, what does Scripture tell us to do? Does it tell us to sit on a pew and wait and do nothing? It tells us exactly the opposite. Before you knew your sins were washed away, now you know your sins remain. We're required to be good stewards of the planet. We're required to stay at our post, do everything we can until we're relieved. That's what biblical Scripture states. So again, we have a lot of pastors, by the way, hiding behind their pulpit, protecting their 501c3 nonprofit, just like the criminal, hypocritical environmental groups. Same behavior for the same reason. So when will the congregations hold their pastors accountable? We're required to be good stewards of the planet, and this is the single most destructive human activity of all. So environmental followers of environmental groups should hold those organizations accountable. People in congregations should hold their pastors accountable. We're required to do our best to stop this kind of destruction of creation.
Well, you're right, Dane. And I always say it this way: fight back legally and responsibly, and always refuse to be a victim. That was a show I did many, many years ago without changing themes and subject. But, Tom, thank you for your observation. But prayer is powerful, too, and let's never give up on those types of, encounters with God. That's a most amazing statement. Line 5, Joe's been waiting in Long Island. Joe, I'm sorry. I'm getting this all wrong on my screen here. Joe in Long Island, you're on the air with Dane. Good morning.
Hi, Dr. Sky. Thank you for taking my call. I have a question for Dane. Dane, this is a big world. You constantly talk about us, like the United States, but there are a lot of other countries that are causing these problems. Which country is causing these issues with geoengineering, and which country is really doing the most to prevent or help and find a solution to these problems? And based on all this information, the way it sounds bad that we're going downhill. How long do we have?
We're in
Good question. Very obvious.
Let me back into this, Joe. We're in free fall from the 100th story of a high-rise building, and we're passing the second story right now. Sidewalks the next stop. That's how dire our situation is. As far as countries that we know are not participating in these programs, you want to hear the answer to that? It's Iran. Iran has been on the floor of the UN stating emphatically with their officials that NATO, U.S., Israel have been cutting off their precipitation for 40 years. Now, I'm not condoning Iran, not condoning their government, their culture. I'm stating a fact. We know they've been the victim of weather warfare, and we know countries in Africa the same, droughted out and forced to allow military occupation, in this case the U.S. military that has 800 bases around the globe. I know it's a sore subject given the day we're on, but you asked the question. We know Iran's not participating, and we know the biggest player in these operations by far is the U.S. military that has 3 times more aerial tankers, which are the primary aircraft used in these operations, 3 times more than all other militaries in the world combined. But that doesn't mean other governments are innocent. They're not. They're all actively or passively participating in these operations. And Joe, have you heard of the COP climate conferences, the COP, the international climate conferences? And I'm sure you've heard of that, Dr. Sky.
We talk about it here on the show, yes.
So what are they really doing? Are they planning on changing business as usual? No. Those conferences are for one purpose only, to force countries to actively or passively participate in climate engineering behind closed doors. That's what those conferences are about. This is a global climate engineering Manhattan Project.
Well, you're right. We talk about that regularly, just like yourself as a regular guest, if you choose to be, and the audience enjoys what you have to say, with Tom Harris in Canada of the National Climate Coalition. He's an interesting guest, too. But, Joe, you get the last word. We have a little bit of time here. You have another comment you'd like to make. Go ahead.
I don't know if Dane ever saw the movie Space Rangers, but it sounds like that's happening, where somehow the planet Earth, people realize that they can no longer live here, and we're able to transfer to another planet in an environment that was created in a way that you thought you were living in utopia, but you weren't. You were surrounded by a very unhealthy environment, but you got away from the rest of the world. And this is sounding like it sounds so drastic to me of what's happening with these chemtrails, and that I appreciate Dane really pushing the envelope here, trying to get people awake to somehow stop this from happening and help the world.
Joe, I appreciate you, and a happy 4th to you. As we continue on here, a little bit of time here to go to the bottom of the caller line here. Let's continue on here. Let's welcome on line 2, Dave in Pennsylvania. You're back with us again. You're on with Dane, and good morning. Happy 4th.
Yes, sir, Sky. I really appreciate your show. I think it's better than Walters or Lionel's. And I want to talk to Dave.
Go right
ahead. Wendy brought up you brought up good points, and Wendy listened to you, and I did too. And Tom further spurred you. Joe made me think. in your opinion, Dane, and I'd like to hear this, do you think the current administration, through the government, the military you brought up, the mighty military of the current administration, basically 2 points, basically in the United States, a world feeder of political ideas, is causing the collapse of the climates, and also we have an election coming up for the Amazon rainforest. Okay? Now I'm gonna hang up, and I hope they put me on the air, and I'm gonna listen as soon as I hang up. The Trump administration, through its world forces, causing problems with the climate for what reason?
Wow. Powerful stuff that Dave was talking about. I think we lost him there in the Ethernet. But go ahead, Dane. He brought up a lot of interesting comments, a very charged one, electricity-wise, and I do appreciate his comments. Go ahead.
I want to make clear that it's not a this or that equation. It's not one country causing everything in any perspective. I mean, we have industrialized, militarized societies all over the globe, and those are great sources of destruction in many ways. Again, there's no single player here, and in regard to the state of the climate, again, it's not a this or that equation, and we have too many people on either side of the fence. We have the environmental left that certainly recognizes the other forms of damage to the planet but refuses to recognize climate engineering. We have those on the right, and I work with legislators from about 30 states. We're working on legislation to pass geoengineering. It's symbolic, but it still matters. It puts it on the radar. Exclusively, that's all legislators on the right, and I'm grateful to them for addressing this issue. However, they tend to completely ignore all the other sources of damage. So we have two different demographics here, and we're trying to build a bridge at geoengineering.org that it's an all-the-above equation. We have many factors affecting the equation. The intentional intervention is the biggest problem of all. We need to deal with that first and foremost, but we try to build bridges by stating we can't talk about the climate from any perspective without addressing this first and foremost. And we do need to remember that. In regard to this administration, we do see a systematic gutting of environmental monitoring or protection across the board, total gutting. And Dr. Sky, you know that, for example, with glyphosate, or in the last few days, there's been a number of additional PFAS forever chemicals that have just been completely deregulated. It's okay now. We can have forever chemicals. That's our current EPA with Lee Zeldin. So there's no Make America Healthy again and all that, glyphosate and PFAS. So again, there's a lot of blame to go around, but we, more than any other time in this government's history, we see a systematic gutting of environmental monitoring that is, in a sense, covering the tracks of the climate engineers.
Well, we just want the truth, and I appreciate you and your opinion. And as everybody, you hear the disclaimer on shows that the host opinions and that of the guest are exactly what they are. They may not necessarily be that of the stations, but that's why we have open forum here to express opinions.
That's not an endorsement. I
understand.
It's not an endorsement for Biden or Harris. I have total disdain.
Totally, Dane, I get it. I totally get it. I just want to, we always say these are the opinions, not only of the host, myself, but also of the guests. And we continue on here. This is amazing, Dane. Again, kudos to you. We look at and measure the number of callers that we're seeing here, and it's almost like an all-record time one here on this radio show, so thanks for being our guest. Let's welcome on line number 4. Andy's been patient in Michigan. If it hasn't happened yet, happy 4th of July to you as we move into the new day. You're on the air.
Gentlemen, awesome show. And 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. They pledged their lives and their fortunes, some sacrificing both, but none sacrificing honor. And George Washington did not sign the Declaration of Independence. I'm trying to find out why. They're telling me he was busy with something else. What could have
He was
that
out
been?
of town. He was out of town, I think. Yes.
He was definitely out of town, and there was no phone service. Okay, gentlemen, but read about these 56 men. They are awesome. Gentlemen, we could do something about our environment individually, like the grand lady said just a few callers before, but we have to look at things like the wetlands, the marshlands. We have to increase them, make sure they're not polluted. Also, trees, growing trees, we could help. And even with Bobby Kennedy Jr. with his health thing with food, and reading labels and contaminants and bad stuff inside America's food chain. But we also have to remember now, we're taking on the world's population. Everybody's coming here, so that increases our population, increases our pollution too. More people driving cars, more oil needed, more water needed. So I think it's about time to help health-wise this country. We stop legal immigration and finally get rid of all the illegals inside the country.
All right. Andy, I do hear you. Not to cut you short, but the time here is running close to the edge of the break, or to the break, I should say. We got the message loud and clear. Dane, a response from you, if you'd like. Do appreciate what you're talking about here. And your opinion back. Go ahead.
I could back into the equation. The U.S. is 5% of global population, and we consume 25% of global resources, so there's nothing balanced about that. As far as Robert Kennedy, I know Robert. He's interviewed me for an hour on this subject, this administration. I would argue that he's not at liberty to address this, nor is anybody else that's now in the big club. I don't care what political stripe they wear. I'm not picking on any particular political stripe. As far as improving wetlands and planting trees and forests, if we don't stop what's taking place in our skies, destroying the ozone layer, disrupting the hydrological cycle, every single drop of rain that falls is toxic, and I'm not blaming just geoengineering, but we know that this mountain of toxic nanoparticles is the single biggest nanoparticle pollution source of all. If we don't stop this, all of those other suggestions of Andy's are totally moot points. Everything is a moot point. If we don't stop this single biggest factor that's destroying Earth's remaining life support systems and allow the planet to respond on its own to the damage already done, we don't deal with this, nothing else will matter.
Dane Wigington is our guest, and we always promote guest website. It's geoengineeringwatch.org, as I've mentioned many times and proud to say it. You can literally spend lots of time at his website, for all the commentary that's there, his own, in his opinion, and news articles that I think are constantly coming in on the concept and subject, a very important one, of geoengineering. Line number 3, Debbie in Florida. If we haven't gotten to you, we'll do that on the other side of the break. Line number 1, Martin in upstate New York. They're holding, and they're doing that in a very special moment. America's 250th anniversary, proud to say it. And if you'd like to be part of what we call the Theater of the Mind, the number's 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848, simply WABC. So much to talk about, so limited time, but in the moment that I have, more about what's happening in our heavens. We talked about earlier in hour number 1, continuance of solar flare activities. A sunspot group, if you go to spaceweather.com, you will see a sunspot group in a picture. It's the big round orange ball of the sun. Active region 4479 has just blown out a number of X-flares, and maybe a little less than X-flares on one side of it. They are headed directly toward the Earth, or indirectly, depending on your angle of view. In the northern parts of Canada right now, large auroral displays are taking place, and the biggest granddaddy of all is sunspot from active region 4478. If you look on spaceweather.com, you could literally drop the Earth inside that sunspot. And remember, when magnetic fields flip, that's when solar flares take place. More with our special guest, Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org, and your comments here on the Theater of the Mind, a show we call the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is Barry Farber. You're listening to Steve Cates. He is a man of many words, but much wisdom in those words. Always refuse to be a victim. Fight back legally and responsibly.
There are 195 countries in the world. Did you know that 29 of those have the colors red, white, and blue on their flags? But there's only one United States of America. Happy 250th to the people of America, and a shout-out to the people of the world, and to those that want to become Americans. 32 minutes after the hour, Dane Wigington is our special guest, geoengineeringwatch.org. He's lighting up our phone lines, and we continue with you in our Theater of the Mind. Let's welcome on line number 3, Debbie in Florida. Happy 4th of July to you. You've been patient. How are you doing?
Hi, Dr. Sky.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very well. Thank you, and I think the audience can too. Go right ahead, please.
Well, thank you for taking my call, and I'm glad you have Dane on because I spoke about this with you before, and we really didn't know the answer. It's about the water in the swimming pool. Now, Peter and I went swimming after there was a lot of chemtrails in the sky, and it rained very hard. We went in the pool, and I was thinking about it. I was like, I wonder if the aluminum goes in this pool water. So after we got out, we were driving home, and we were looking at our arms. Were very shiny. They looked like they were almost silver.
Ooh, that's not good.
Now, am I crazy? Am I crazy, or is it very dangerous to go in the pool water after it rains?
Well, Debbie, I don't think there was too much chlorine in the pool, but let Dane explain from his side of the equation, since you brought up the term what you saw in the sky. Dane, this is fascinating, a live report on something that happened from a pool after they got out.
In any given circumstance, we certainly couldn't state with definity what that may have been showing up on your skin. We can say that the largest quantity of aluminum nanoparticles in a single rain event we've had is about 3,400 parts per billion. That's highly toxic rain. That's in a single rain event. We also have surfactants in rain. Dr. Sky and Debbie, have you seen sometimes after rain it looks like it's foaming water running down gutters?
I have. Yeah.
That's surfactants. We know surfactants are in the patents. We know it's in the rain, and we test the precipitation before it hits the ground, of course, so we know it's coming down in the rain column. Surfactants are used to reduce coagulation of the particles as they're dispersed, so they have a longer suspension time in the atmosphere. So again, it's a plethora of toxic chemicals. Bottom line, it's in everything. It's in everything. So as far as food goes, the smaller the organism, for example, a head of lettuce, you're eating the plant itself, there's going to be more contaminant uptake in that than, for example, a fruit from a large tree. That tree tends to filter some of the contaminants, but it's in everything at this point. Yeah, it's in everything.
Well, Debbie, I hope your arms are not glowing. I mean, I think Dane has given us at least an answer, but he can't be too specific. I mean, we'd have to see it, but I hope you're well, and most important, happy 4th of July. Not to blow off the conversation, but we do appreciate your call. Let's continue. Line number 1, Martin's been patient. He's in upstate New York, and you're on with Dane. Happy 4th.
Hey there, Dr. Sky. Happy 4th to you. Happy Independence Day to your guest and you. Thank you for your show. I listen every week. We got to get the SR-71 flying around. SR-71. We got to get it out there over the football stadiums.
Well, you know what, Martin? Let me jump in here. Let me jump in real quick. I have a gentleman friend of mine who is one of the guys that flew it, and he wrote 2 books, and I'm trying to get him to come on here. He gave me an opportunity when I went down to Love Field in Dallas many, many years ago. They had a flight simulator, an actual cockpit simulator of the SR-71. So I sat in there, and he was behind me with the canopy open, and he explained to me how that whole thing worked with the J-58 engines. But you're so right. A little off subject for the subject, but wow, that was a most amazing aircraft, and you're right. But I think they have something more sophisticated than the SR-71, don't you think, Martin? I do.
Your friend there, he's really a downer. He's a downer, man. He makes me think of Slayer, the Seasons in the Abyss album, Skeletons of Society.
Well, I guess he tried to express himself. We got Dane a little off subject with SR-71s, but he's gone. Go ahead.
I would respond to that though, and that's part of the reason why we're in the shape we're in, because nobody wants to face the truth. Nobody, even the environmental groups. You see an environmental documentary, and they'll say they'll allude to how badly damaged, or part of how badly damaged the environment is, and then they end with, but buy a few solar panels and a Prius and we'll all live happily ever after, which is total nonsense. The so-called renewable energy isn't really renewable. It's at best a carbon fuel extender. So we have everybody looking through colored lenses and not seeing the oncoming train, no matter how loud the horn's blaring or the lights are flashing. So I would argue this: if society is comparable to the occupants of a car sitting on the train tracks, playing with the radio, and the train is coming, should you not depress them by not telling them that? Let them sit there until it hits?
No,
I mean, does that make sense?
No, you make a very good analogy and a very good point here on this particular radio show. But here, I'm going to shift gears on you because there's so many subjects that I know you have expertise in and knowledge. This is very interesting. Let's talk here in the West particularly. Water issues. But this is not just the West. This is all over the country. Here in Phoenix, if things don't go right, God help us, we're dependent on the Colorado River, winter snowpack and all the melting. Now everything is so concerning with water issues. Then we have people. I'm jumping off into other subjects here to get your response.
That's okay.
People have had it with the surveillance cameras everywhere. You go in stores. I don't know if it's Walmart, but some of those stores are getting rid of those automated machines. People are tired of all that kind of stuff. And then we continually find out the rejection of data centers. Now it goes into a subject: water usage, electric use. It seems that people are on edge about this. And then we add this into the mix. So many things that are going on here. It's just incredible. But again, a quick look-see from you. The water issues are so important. The whole thing with the data centers. A lot of changing subjects here. But then I wanted to hit you with this one because this is the one you have special information on. Ladies and gentlemen, when you listen to this show and you hear about all this high number of earthquakes taking place, look at what's happening in South America. Look what's happened in Japan. Look what's happened in California. I could go on and on and on. But earthquakes induced by tectonic weaponry, in your opinion. Give us the skinny on that. That's amazing.
Back into the water part first. Again, here we have 40 million people in the U.S. Southwest about to go high and dry, 7 states, and there is no larger factor in this equation that is completely derailing the hydrological cycle than climate engineering operations. We have record low snowpack by far the entire western U.S., and even the meager amount of snow that did fall, because it's a chemically nucleated element, it tends to sublimate, and that means that it reverts from a solid to a gas, bypassing the liquid phase, dry ice being the extreme form of a sublimating chemically nucleated element. So
you are right.
Even the little bit of snow that's there is not producing much runoff, and in regard to the true state of Lake Mead and Lake Powell, it's beyond dire. In fact, Lake Powell has already hit its all-time record low, and it's very near dead pool right now. And even the water that's there, Lake Powell, I just saw one report today that said it's at 23% of capacity, but that's a lie because there's so much sedimentation in that basin. That remaining 23% is actually about 11%. We know there's 110 feet of sediment behind Hoover Dam. Same situation. So we know that the 29% that's remaining in Lake Mead is about half of that as well. People have no idea how dire the scenario is, and climate engineering is the single biggest hydrological disrupting factor of all. I did presentations a decade and a half ago. Engineered drought catastrophe, target California. Everything I said then is more true and relevant now than then.
It's amazing, Dane. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying, if people care, if they wait till they turn their taps on and nothing comes out, that's too late. And as far as groundwater in Arizona, for example, we know that there's been a water volume equivalent of Lake Mead pumped out of the aquifers there. Not going to be groundwater there for much longer either. There's no cure here. So again, if people want to allow the global hydrological cycle to resume, we start by stopping climate engineering, period. And again, if they search the engineering drought section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, that's a good place to start. And we have a weekly commercial-free, political-free broadcast on radio stations around the country. We pay for out of pocket. Global Alert News for free. Homepage of Geoengineering Watch. That's a source of updates also. On the tectonic weaponry.
Well, Dan, before you do that, let me jump into the water issue here, just to put it in perspective. Here in Phoenix, we have like 0.3 of an inch for the entire year so far. Oh, my God. When an annual rainfall here is like 7.28 inches of rain. So we're expecting a monsoon season. But the point is, I'm trying to relate this not just to me in Arizona, but look at the other places around the earth. Weather systems, as you're talking about, with the reduction of sunlight in what you're claiming, in your opinion, is happening in the upper atmosphere, man-induced, human induction into this. This is really amazing. So things are really changing, and they're changing very rapidly here. And you're so right. We need to pay attention to this. We've had the strangest weather. Look at our friends back on the East Coast right now with the most incredible heat. Has heat like that of triple digits been there in the past? Yes, it has. But there's a big difference as you describe high humidity. And what was that number that you gave us, the effective temperature in the Washington, D.C. area with 55% humidity?
Washington, D.C., Thursday of this week, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Official high temperature of 102. Official humidity reading of 53%. according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that's a heat index of 127.8 degrees. We're not guessing here. So again, it's the humidity that makes all the difference in the world. And let me put that into real perspective. The highest, your listeners can look up everything I say. I hope they do. So the highest heat index we know of happened in Iraq a year and a half ago. Heat index of 180 degrees. No, I'm not making a mistake on that. 180. And what were the factors in that equation? That was still only an ambient temperature of 105. That doesn't sound very high, does it? But that was a humidity of 85%, and that's the difference. And historically, those conditions have not existed on our planet. It's called the wet bulb effect. We're talking about completely different atmospheric chemistry, and the reason the heat index is so high is because the human body can't cool itself. And that's why that number goes through the roof as the humidity goes up.
Amazing. No, you bring up some very interesting points. I mean, here we're in the mecca of heat. If you look at Death Valley with high temperatures, apparently the highest temperature on Earth, and I'm not reading this, apparently was in Libya, and I believe it was probably somewhere, around 130 plus, maybe 134 degrees Fahrenheit.
136, I believe.
136, okay, measured ambient temperature. And then somebody played around with the one in Death Valley that it was obviously close, but they said there was something wrong. But the point is, things are changing, and this is an important show, ladies and gentlemen. Still time, 1-800-848-9222 to try to bring you into the theater of the mind. And we'll go, after we come back from the break, to line 2. Lamar's been patient in Georgia. And then, not much time to do it, and I will have to have you back to go into much more detail. The earthquake-induced tectonic weaponry, in your opinion, and the research behind it, I find that most fascinating. You're with me, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, as we continue here celebrating the 4th of July in all the different time zones around the world. And, ladies and gentlemen, our 250th anniversary of, in my opinion, and yours, I'm sure, the greatest nation on the earth, the United States of America. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
This is Dr. Peter Lilback, president of the Providence Forum. I'm so glad to be with Dr. Sky and the Dr. Sky Show. Make sure you listen in because this is one of the places you're going to remember the great truths of the lost voice of freedom that are rediscovered when we go back to our founding fathers and the great principles they've given to us.
47 minutes after the hour, we continue now to the top of the hour with our special guest, Dane, talking about geoengineering. But first, let's go to line number 2 before Dane brings up some very interesting information as we welcome Lamar in Georgia. Happy 4th of July to you, Lamar. How are you?
Oh, good evening, gentlemen. I come with a question, sir. How are we to respond? How are we to believe your assertion, sir, your fantastic assertion, your fantastic story, that in the scales of justice our beloved nation is found to be wanting, and the world's principal and premier sponsor of state terrorism, the author of what occurred on October 7th in the Holy Land, where men, women, and babies were slaughtered, murdered, that this nation is found to be of greater nobility. God forbid, heaven forbid. Let me tell you something, sir. There are things occurring in space and time and beyond space and time that illustrate the undeniable fact that our country, America, has a rendezvous with destiny. Whether we like it or not, a rendezvous with destiny that is a call to duty and a demand for retribution to our enemies, foreign and domestic, who have done such great injury to our country and to all mankind. God bless America and the man who leads it, the greatest man alive in the world today. And believe me when I tell you, sir, beware the fury of a patient people and a patient man. God bless President Donald John Trump in America.
Wow. You know, Lamar, you bring up a good subject, and you know where I think you should have been tonight? You should have been right there with the president at Mount Rushmore, because the way you describe it, it's very powerful. And believe me, my friend, thank you for giving us more inspiration on the American exceptionalism that we talk about. Thank you, Lamar in Georgia. Happy 4th of July. Let's continue on, Dane. This is interesting, a subject that requires more than about 7 minutes.
If I could
Earthquake-induced...
If I could respond for a moment, just to take the gloves off, permission to do that.
Yeah,
I would encourage Lamar and anyone who claims to be patriotic to do real investigation objective investigation on the whole official 9/11 narrative, on the October 7th scenario, and on things that individuals, true patriots like Smedley Butler, what he had to say about his service in the U.S. military. And again, I understand our U.S. military brothers and sisters are there for valid reasons, for honorable reasons, but I remind them of their oath to protect their countrymen from all threats, foreign and domestic. So a person who blindly waves their flags, that's not patriotism. That's tyranny. You don't blindly wave your flag and gulp down whatever you're fed officially. So, again, true patriots actually investigate no matter how painful that investigation is.
I know, and I think Lamar expresses it in his way. I appreciate him, as he's called many times, talking about America and the exceptionalism that we believe we have. And it's very interesting, not to get off subject here as the host, but the thing I'd like to bring up is how many people do not really recognize what the significance of July 4th is. It's not just about cooking a hot dog or a hamburger or going out the next day and buying a TV with 0% interest or a car, even though we like capitalism. It's about the true identity of how the nation was formed. It was with blood, sweat, and tears. But just give us a couple of minutes to tease us on something that I think is really fascinating. It would require hours. Earthquake-induced tectonic weaponry. Your story is interesting. We could go on geology-wise, but your information here is important. What is this whole tectonic weaponry in earthquake inductions? This is interesting.
Available science makes clear that weapons of mass destruction like ionosphere heater facilities like HAARP, which is a directional facility, it can be steered. It can bounce an extremely powerful microwave transmission off the now reflective atmosphere back down into Earth's strata. And if you bounce that much power, in the case of millions of watts of power, that transmission, if kept in a seismically sensitive region, will eventually trigger seismic activity. So let's have an example of that. MIT, I'm sure your listeners know who MIT is. Your listeners can look this up. I encourage them to look up every single thing I state. MIT acknowledged, for example, in the 2011 Japanese quake, they acknowledged what they called, quote, extremely anomalous atmospheric heating directly above the epicenter for 3 days prior to that quake. We just got an email from a number of citizens groups in Venezuela that told us they have never experienced an earthquake like this. Instead of hearing a constant reverberating rumbling, for example, they heard a lot of ticking sounds atmospherically. They've never heard that before. And is it just a coincidence that countries who don't toe the line suddenly end up getting hit with an extreme quake? And Japan is a case in point. Japan was allying with its regional partners immediately the year prior to that earthquake. Turkey flipped the middle finger at NATO and got hit with a cluster of quakes. Haiti was hit hard and then taken over based on humanitarian aid to that country. We see it again and again and again. Is it just coincidence? And we know scientifically that this power exists. You can't microwave a sensitive region of strata and superheat it and not have something happen. I mean, it'd be like...
Well, let's connect the dots in the limited time we have. So you're saying the induction is because of the HAARP projects, and there's not just only one in America. I'm sure other countries in the world have developed this. I've read that the Russians, then the Soviet Union, had this type of device. So is that what you're saying directly? The causation is because of this HAARP-induced energy in the upper atmosphere?
It's not... It's bouncing that energy off the atmosphere back down into the strata. What happens if you put something in a microwave oven and just turn the dial on full and walk away? It's going to blow up eventually. So again, we're seeing earthquakes from fracking wells. That's scientifically acknowledged, and this is a much more powerful weapon than that. There's about 100 ionosphere heaters around the globe, by the way, to put that into perspective too, and they can network as well. So again, we have too many, quote, coincidences here, and too many strange occurrences, even atmospheric occurrences directly or during these tectonic events. So, again, why would we think that when we know the science behind these types of weapons, why would we think they're not being used? And if we look at those in power, even biological warfare, according to the Washington Post as far back as 1977, hate to implicate the U.S. military in this case, but I will because we've talked about atmospheric particulates and the effect on human health. According to the Post and other sources, as of 1977, the U.S. military had conducted no less than 277 open-air biological tests on innocent, unknowing U.S. civilians. That's a matter of historical record. I'm simply saying those in power don't care about our troops. They don't. Dr. Sky, you've seen the films of the nuclear blast in Nevada, and they had the troops jump out
I
of the
have.
trench.
Oh, yeah, that's ridiculous. That's
They
heinous.
run toward the blast center.
Right.
They were told to run toward the blast center. They all died
Horrible.
an early death. And even the nuclear test in Nevada, we have peer-reviewed study now to prove that there were no less than about 600,000 Americans that died, the downwinders, from the Nevada tests. How many?
Oh, yeah, St. George, Utah, specifically. Right, St. George, Utah had a high incidence of cancer rates.
Yep.
And I think John Wayne, and not to steal the thunder here from anyone, but the whole thing with John Wayne, they were saying some of his later movies, that was also in the field where nuclear weapons were tested, and the downwinders, as you call them, or the upwinds in St. George, Utah, an amazing thing. That's horrible. If the stories are true, that's the causation. But let's also say this, why I believe you're on the right track is also, as reported by 60 Minutes and other people, this whole acoustic weapon technology like the Havana Syndrome. So if you could create that type of an acoustic weapon to use against humans, and that's been a fact that's been proven, can you imagine from what you're describing, this induction from these HARPs up into the atmosphere and bouncing it back, and maybe even, and I'm sounding maybe conspiratorial here, what happened in Maui, of course, with the fires over there. Some were talking about DEW, directed energy weapons. Lots of crazy things going on, and we need the answers to that. So you get a few minutes to wrap it up. We're almost out of time. Sad to say, but I do appreciate everyone as being part of the Dr. Sky experience and what we call the theater of the mind. You got a couple of minutes to wrap it up, and thank you for being here, Dane.
I'll do it quick. Quick clarification on the ignition source for fires, Maui or Palisades. Although we have directed energy weapons like HARP, for the source of ignition, the claims that were made in those fires about directed energy weapons, we do not have available science to support that. Directed energy anything, if there's particulate matter in the air like a smoke canopy, null and voids everything, laser anything. Doesn't work, whether it's targeting in Iraq or anything along the lines of what's been described. What we're citing geoengineering as being a core causal factor in Palisades, in Lahaina. What is setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity? And that is climate engineering. We have a U.S. military document posted on our site, 140 pages long. It's titled Wildfires as a Military Weapon. It describes exactly the kind of years-long preparation to prepare an area for burning with that kind of ferocity. We can speculate about the agendas and objectives, but the fact that there are very nefarious wheels turning here is inarguable. Bottom line, don't feel helpless. People need to understand they have far more power than they ever were trained or taught to believe. Any one of us could be, again, the final pebble to trigger the landslide of awakening. If you share credible data from a credible source, don't point at the sky and rant. Share credible data. Allow that seed to grow. It's difficult for people to face realities like this. Ask others to do the same. If we can force this issue to the full light of day, we will cause a shockwave around the world. We will alter the paradigm. We will reach the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment. All of us are needed in that fight.
Dan, I appreciate you spending the time with us, and I hope that we'll do this again and we'll talk more. Keep us updated, and ladies and gentlemen, you have the opportunity to go from the Theater of the Mind here to check his website, geoengineeringwatch.org. Who is he? His name is Dane Wigington, and he brings us this good information. And again, in his opinion, in the opinion of other guests that you hear here, we try to bring you, and certainly work hard at it, to bring you the best guests from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, and of course, celebrity guests in the mix, American exceptionalism. Stay tuned tomorrow as we continue in less than 24 hours. Author Dennis Neal, a book called Oregoners, Now Leaving Oregon, How One State Chased Away Business and People. Why? American exceptionalism and how to keep it if we can. And that is the theme for tomorrow night. Stories of American exceptionalism, appropriate as we move around this date, July 4th, 2026, and our celebration of American exceptionalism, 250 years. America young, may it reign for many thousands of years, as long as we do it right. And a republic if you can keep it. As Benjamin Franklin once said, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned to 77 WABC for another side of midnight with Lionel as he takes you to the sunrise point, as these are the longest days of the year, as if you needed me to remind you, with lots of heat and other things going on. But again, thanks to our special guest, Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org. And thanks to our helmsman, as we want to thank Bill and Jackson for the help that they give us to make sure that all the callers that call into the Theater of the Mind can at least express their opinions, a good part of what the Bill of Rights talks about, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. We'll see you in less than 24 hours. And always, as we remind you, since we look to the skies, always remember, keep your feet on the ground, and always remember, keep your eyes to the skies for so many things that are happening here on the Dr. Sky Experience on the Powerhouse radio station, the Powerhouse Blowtorch, Talk Radio 77 WABC. Happy 4th of July.